The LCS Analyst Desk shared their top lane power rankings this weekend, and while most of the ensuing discussion was around Fudge, it was actually Phreak's 6th place ranking for Ssumday that caught my attention. Especially when Phreak tweeted at 100 Thieves general manager Papa Smithy afterwards saying, and I quote, "Ssumday doesn't play weak side well." See, I've always said that Ssumday's best contributions throughout his career have come from weak side play, and I think close analysis bears that out. Before we dive into the topic though, let's agree on terminology. When I'm talking about weak side performance, I'm referring to the way a player handles their lane when their jungler and mid laner are playing to the other side of the map, the ways they manage their vulnerability, and then how well they contribute in the mid and late game afterwards. Let's start from a 30,000 foot view. If you look at all the champions Ssumday has played at least 20 times in his career, you see champions who are usually associated with weak side, like Maokai, Shen, and Gangplank, some that are matchup dependent like Gnar, Aatrox, or Fiora, and then Renekton, who's usually strong side but also depends on matchup. Out of these champions, Ssumday's win rate is lowest on Renekton and highest on Maokai and Fiora, both of which are drafted for different kinds of late game contributions. This isn't a lane dominant champion pool. In fact, Ssumday's career statistical profile has never really been about generating large early leads, either in the LCK or the LCS. When you look at his gold plus experience differences at 10 and 15 minutes across his entire career, compared to some other well-known top laners, he has generated more leads than Impact, the king of weak side, but he gets ahead a lot less than lane-dominant players like Alphari and the Shy. Since coming to North America in 2017, Ssumday has generated slightly larger leads than before, but he still hasn't been a win-lane, win-game player in the LCS. His champion pool this split has featured some early pressure in the form of a loss on Jace and a 5-1 record on Renekton, but there's still a lot of that scaling and utility flavor. And even with 6 games of Renekton, 100 Thieves aren't usually treating Ssumday's early game as a win condition this year, based on how they're investing their jungle attention. The LCS stats team shared some jungle proximity numbers with me for this episode, and they show that Ssumday has the 2nd lowest jungle proximity and 2nd lowest jungle proximity difference of any LCS top laner this split. Jungle proximity measures the proportion of time between 3 and 15 minutes that your jungler spends within 2,000 range of you. Jungle proximity difference is the average difference between your jungle proximity and your lane opponent's jungle proximity. So Ssumday is spending a lot of time in weak side scenarios, like he always has throughout his entire career. How do we measure whether he's performing well in those circumstances? One way is to see whether he's giving up deaths and gold leads. Adjusting Ssumday's lane outcomes based on global Diamond 1 Plus solo queue data, Ssumday is slightly underperforming the lane matchups he's being placed in, especially between the 10 and 15 minute range. He's also giving up more early deaths than most other top laners, which contributes to those golden experience deficits. But out of Ssumday's 12 pre-15 minute deaths this split, 6 of them have come at the enemy turret. 100 Thieves have actually had a lot of issues executing Ssumday's strong side scenarios. They've failed to execute tower dives well, and there have been signs that Ssumday and Closer are struggling to get on the same page.
Lane. This is playable. Closer has flash and ult. Hoonie's in range. This is an easy Q, an easy sleep, but Ssumday didn't wait around. Ssumday finished the recall.
Maybe that's partly why the team is leaving Ssumday on his own so much. When Ssumday does die in weak side scenarios, he's often gaining value for his team. In this sequence from week 2 against FlyQuest, Ssumday is on weak side, with Closer covering a shove from FBI and Huhi across the map. Jose Diodo comes in for a gank, which Ssumday initially escapes. Jose Diodo now has no camps to farm, so he can either recall or repeat the gank. He comes back on the next wave and barely outplays Ssumday's slice and dice to get the kill. But 100 Thieves gained a ton across the map with Closer's counter jungling and FBI and Huhi punishing their lane. A minute and a half later, 100 Thieves are up 500 gold, not just in spite of Ssumday's death, but partly because of the pressure he drew, and they end up snowballing the game to a win. Ssumday's strengths shine brightest after the laning phase ends.
Gets the Stridebreaker slow as well. He's mega. PoE is in danger. The flash play gets too beautiful by Ssumday. Hoonie's gonna drop as well. Outstanding right there by Ssumday's Gnar, and it's time to look at Baron.
He's great at pushing out side lanes and finding flanking angles with or without teleport, and that goes all the way back to his Maokai days on KT Rolster in the LCK. When you put the entire picture together, you can see 100 Thieves are mostly playing through the bottom side of the map and leaving Ssumday isolated, because their attempts to play through him with Closer and Damonte weren't working out. But even though he gives up some deaths and slightly underperforms in his laning matchups, He's drawing enemy resources and allowing FBI and Huhi to thrive in their incredibly aggressive 2v2 style. And later in the game, no matter how Ssumday's lane went, 100 Thieves can always count on him to play the map and the team fights incredibly well. To me, that's the description of a very effective weak side player.
You know, when I walk down the street in a mask, people yell at me and they say, "Is that gaming god Travis Gafford?" And it's always kind of embarrassing, you know. I kind of like cover the mask a little bit more, try to duck away, but then eventually a lot of people are all yelling about it. And what people don't know is that I would not be the gaming god that I am today without Alienware. You can check them out in the description, alienware.com/Travis10off. It'll save you 10% off your order. And then maybe you can get people cheering your name randomly on the street. I can't guarantee it. There's no promises, right? Like, this is not like a legally binding. Like, if there's fine print at the bottom, and there's not, because I don't want my editor to spend time doing that. But if there was, it would say that there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. Look, I just don't want any liability around this. So, but alienware.com/Travis, Travis10off. Check the link in the description. Use that code, save 10%, and it'll help me create content like this. The video that you just watched, I mean, specifically, and the other videos on this channel.